The NFL is full of money, and so much of it goes towards contracts and free agency. Is that the smartest move? Probably not. We're digging into the biggest NFL contracts for the players who did the least. Plus, I'm getting into the heftiest paydays for NFL stars this year, so keep watching. How's it going, you guys? I'm Devin Howard. We are always getting into the latest sports news, so click subscribe to stay updated and tap the bell to be notified. Contracts and free agency are a huge risk to teams. The people who get them typically have performed well enough to deserve them, but since they're older athletes now, they come with a lot more concerns. We all know that with age comes less physical resilience, and once you become a free agent, you run a higher risk of getting injured. If an injury does occur early on in the contract, the team is basically just screwed. There's also the possibility that the player simply loses their touch. In order to combat the risk, NFL teams usually only make a percentage of the contract guaranteed. So one that's valued at $100 million won't look as bad if only $25 million of it is guaranteed. It's always a bummer when a player doesn't perform as expected, and it happens all too often. Sometimes it's just about poor performance, an injury, or just plain old bad luck. So let's talk about some of the players who made ridiculous amounts of money despite their less than stellar performance, starting with Matt Flynn. For a moment there, Matt Flynn was living every backup quarterback's dream. He was drafted in the 7th round by the Packers, and for the longest time he languished as Aaron Rodgers' backup. In the final game of the 2011 season, Matt ended up getting the start to give Rodgers a break, and he ended up throwing 480 yards and 6 touchdowns in a win. He really came out of the gates running on that one. He carpe diem'd that game and gave it his all, which was a smart move because it landed him an extremely comfortable deal as a free agent that offseason. Matt signed a 3-year contract for $19 million with the Seattle Seahawks. It seemed like Matt had proven himself worthy of such a contract, especially in that game against the Lions, so he got the big bucks as a result. But unfortunately, he was never able to fully gel well with his teammates or Seattle and didn't become a star like they thought he would. That same offseason, the Seahawks drafted Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. Wilson ended up really pulling his weight and beating out Matt for the starting quarterback position, and get this, he was in his rookie year. Matt only made 3 appearances that season and he didn't start a single game, but the athlete walked away with $8 million thanks to his contract and signing bonus. $8 million, all for doing very little. Isn't that the life? The next season, Seattle traded Matt to Oakland. Over there, he restructured the rest of his deal into a 2-year, $11.5 million contract. In Oakland, he started only once and made 2 appearances with them before getting released. But thanks to that restructured contract that guaranteed part of it as a signing bonus, on top of additional salaries from Buffalo and Green Bay that year after his release, he still made more than $6.5 million. So this guy barely stepped foot on a playing field at all, and he still made $15 mil in 2 years. Gotta give this guy props. He knows how to work a contract. Next up, let's talk about Michael Vick. We're going back to his Philadelphia Eagles era, so the Eagles took a risk on Vick after he was out of jail and reinstated into the NFL. The whole thing could have been, and really should have been, a lasting PR nightmare for the disgraced football star, but it actually ended up benefiting him. In 2009, he barely got any playing time as a backup, but by 2010, he was thrown into the starting lineup and proceeded to have the best season of his career, which basically got the Eagles to land a spot in the playoffs. Guess the guy was really motivated to show the world he's more than just a terrible dogfighter. I still see him for what he is. But the Eagles were willing to turn a blind eye to his abusive past, and he received a hefty $100 million contract, $40 million of which was actually guaranteed. The first big contract of his career came from the Falcons, but was derailed by the aforementioned dogfighting crime, so dude got a second chance. But the $40 million ended up being wasted because Vick suffered injuries and was just, in general, not playing well. Maybe he got too comfortable too quickly. The next year, his contract was restructured, which forced him to take a pay cut if he wanted to stay with the team, which he agreed to. The athlete got the first few starts, but ultimately, after several mediocre plays plays and a hamstring injury, they had Nick Foles take over, essentially ending Vick's Philly sports career. In those 3 years, Vick pocketed $45 million despite very little playing time and unimpressive performances. In that time, he also saw no playoff starts, so that $45 million was certainly a big waste. Does he know how freaking lucky he is to have walked away with that sum of cash after serving jail time and proving to be not so valuable of a player? If only we all got rewarded for that type of mediocrity. Our third athlete who pocketed tons of cash for little to no work is Javon Walker. When he was on the Packers in the 2000s, he seemed like a promising athlete. In 2004, he had nearly 1,400 yards receiving with 12 touchdowns and went over 1,000 yards again in 2006 after being traded to the Broncos. He did suffer from injuries though, so the Broncos released him in 2007. Despite his injuries, the Oakland Raiders were still interested in him as a player. They felt he still had a lot of potential to be a standout wide receiver, so they signed him to a 6-year, $55 million deal. That's a huge chunk of change for someone with a lot of injuries and 2 good years. Walker stayed in Oakland for 2 years, and in his first season, he caught 15 passes for 196 yards and 1 touchdown. In 2009, he only appeared in 3 games and didn't catch a single pass. Look, it was a pretty crazy deal for Walker to begin with. Tons of analysts and fans tried to warn the Oakland team against giving him such a massive paycheck, and his underwhelming performance ended up proving all of them right. It still blows my mind that he was able to walk away with so much money even though he was notoriously injury prone. I hope he was grateful for that contract. Moving on, we've got to talk about Albert Haynesworth. Before the 2009 season, Albert had built up his reputation as an excellent pass rusher with a bad attitude. Washington won the competition to sign the defensive tackle with the hopes that his pass rushing abilities would make a 7-year, $100 million contract for him worth it. 7 years, $100 million. Unfortunately, Albert was a gamble to begin with because of that attitude problem I mentioned earlier. The athlete would often get into arguments and screaming matches with the coaching staff, making the team's vibe anything but pleasant. He also failed routine fitness tests, which is bizarre considering he's a professional athlete. When on the field, he was lackluster and lazy, and it honestly just looked like he wasn't putting in any effort. Obviously, this was a huge disappointment to Washington considering they thought they'd signed on a skilled player for at least 7 years. Fortunately for the team, and unfortunately for Albert, his contract was cut short after being on the team for just 2 years. He was traded to the Patriots afterwards. Even though he only completed 2 years of his contract, he still made major bank, like major bank. He got a signing bonus of a cool $5 million, and in 2010 he had a bonus of $21 million. Neither of these bonuses hurt his salary combined, but they did combine with his salary to pay him more than $30 million for 2 years of terrible plays and team tension. Finally, let's dive into Sam Bradford. Sam proved that he was a good quarterback when he's on the field. He's a truly solid player, and because of that, he was the #1 overall pick in 2009. He signed a 6-year, $78 million deal with a huge $50 million of it as guaranteed money. All of this came after his rookie year and led into his sophomore 2010 season. The only issue with him, though, was that he was prone to hurting himself, a rough reality he had to face in that second NFL season. In 2010, he played only 10 games and was riddled with injuries, but his contract and bonuses that year allowed him to take home more than $36 million. In 2012, Sam made an impressive rebound which carried on into 2013, but then he tore his ACL halfway through the season and was stuck on the sidelines for the rest of the year, still getting paid to nurse his injury. Sam hoped to be fully recovered by the start of the 2014 season, but another ACL injury in a preseason game prevented him from ever stepping foot onto the field. Rough. The guy played about a half season over 2 years and still made $23 million in salary. Luckily for him, he recovered in time for the 2 seasons after that and was able to start consistently with the Eagles and the Vikings, but then knee injuries cursed him again, and by 2017 he was only able to play 2 games before sitting on the bench for the rest of the season. By the time the playoffs rolled around, he was back on the roster, but by then quarterback Case Keenum had overtaken him as a starter, but it still didn't prevent Sam from pocketing $8 million for that season alone. The guy has made as much money being injured as he has playing football. Pretty impressive if you ask me. Now that we've covered some infamous contract busts in the NFL, let's get into the biggest contracts we've seen in 2019. Of course, this is kind of inexact. A player can be considered the highest paid in the NFL in terms of average annual salary, but still have less guaranteed money than someone else. So first up, let's talk about Drew Brees. He restructured his contract with the Saints, allowing them to open up some cap space. Apparently, the Saints changed some things around so that they cleared out $10.8 million in salary cap space. Brees will still be pocketing $23 million that he's due in 2019, and this restructure will push his cap figure higher in 2020 so that they have more space to use now. Before all of this, the team was set to have just under $5 million in cap space, but now with that extra money, they're hoping to re-sign backup quarterback Teddy Bridgewater as well as land a few other star players. Brees is still guaranteed his average annual salary, and by next year, when he's no longer under contract, it'll be bumped up even more. If the Saints want to keep him around, they're going to have to get creative with their numbers again because he's getting expensive. Derek Carr, the quarterback for the Raiders, earns an average salary of $25 million. That alone is more than I can even dream of. But the athlete is guaranteed $40 million of that, so let's just say he'll be living a very comfy life. Matthew Stafford is even better off than that. The Lions quarterback earns an average annual salary of $27 million, but he's guaranteed $60.5 million. Vikings quarterback Kirk Cousins will be walking away with an annual salary of $28 million with a guaranteed $84 million. And Matt Ryan, quarterback on the Falcons, is making away with even more moolah. The superstar athlete has a $30 million a year salary with a guaranteed $100 million. And finally, Aaron Rodgers, the Packers quarterback, has a $33.5 million yearly salary with $103 million guaranteed. Alright, but we're not done yet. We have to talk about this offseason because things got really chaotic. The 2019 season is going to be one to watch. Let's get into Odell Beckham Jr. He was traded to the Browns after speculation swirled about whether or not he'd be on the Giants next year. This was a blockbuster moment. The 26-year-old star player has shattered all-time records for receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns per game in his first 3 NFL seasons. Fans are livid with the Giants GM for letting go of such a valuable player. Some people were even burning their jerseys over it. He is the NFL's highest paid wide receiver. He got a 5-year, $90 million extension last August. But Beckham was coming off a rough season. He broke his ankle and was only able to play in 4 games. Ownership didn't want to give up on their superstar and deal him away for a package of players and picks to fill the holes in their roster. But after another losing season, it was time to test the market for him. In exchange for the standout athlete, they're getting a first-round pick this year, a starting safety in Peppers, and a third-round pick, plus they freed up cap space. In another monumental moment, the Jets got the guy at the top of their free agency list, Le'Veon Bell. ESPN reported that Bell signed a deal with the Jets for 4 years and $52.5 million. Bell has rushed 5,336 yards and 53 touchdowns and has 312 catches for 2,660 yards and second scores. He's versatile, aggressive, and downright ferocious. The NFL has really taken some big risks this year, and I'm excited to see how all of this plays out. Okay, you guys, lots to talk about in the comments. Which NFL contract was the most stunning for you? Were you surprised to see Beckham get traded? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'm Devin Howard. I'll see you later.